We are back with my friend Alan Jaeger. Alan is known primarily for teaching throwing. He is, in my consideration, the leading throwing expert in the country. He has a list of clients a block and a half long. They're very prestigious. Has begun work with, how many, 5 major league teams right now?
Yeah, we've consulted with, I think, maybe 5 or 6.
Right. So his stuff is right on the cutting edge. It works not only for arm strength, but for injury prevention. Great stuff. But one of the things that we are delving into, and we want to talk about right now, is the mental side of baseball. 2 things that were really vitally important to me when I went back into coaching, especially working with kids, is what has hooked me up with Alan. Is I saw that nobody was teaching throwing, so that is what gravitated me towards his programs. But the other thing I know from my own experience, particularly as a player, is that baseball is all mental. Yogi Berra said 90%, what is it? 90% of the game is half mental, or some malapropism like that. But this is all of it. It really is separate. What separates the wheat from the chaff, the men from the boys, is the mental approach to baseball. Another reason why it's important to me, Alan works a lot with college players and professionals. The industry is a lot with kids, and one of the vital issues to me is that baseball at the upper level is almost 2 different games from what goes on in high school and below, and that's not quite fair to the kids that aspire to be great. What you want to do is, it's somewhere along the line, I don't think that they have to be professional, but if they aspire to be great players, they should be given this. They should be given the sense of commitment, the skill level that's different, and most importantly, the mental game is such a huge part of the game. At the upper level, you don't realize at the professional level, all these guys are great baseball players. And what often separates somebody's success and not success is the mental game.
Sure.
So can you tell me how you got into this? And I know that you're really passionate about this. What's your focus? And let's get into some detail about what your programs are.
Well, as we talked earlier, I was a junior at Cal State Northridge, and up to that point in my life, I had never really known of having many issues, if you will, with regard to performing and all that. And I went through a very difficult time, really to the point where it, I think it essentially kind of ended my career. Well, it did end my career for sure. So I was just curious as like, what was this? I was dealing with some stress, anxiety, and just kind of overwhelmed me. And so I saw a sports psychologist, and I just started getting interested in the world of psychology. And then in my upper division courses at Northridge, he told this Zen story one day, and it was so cool, and I asked him where it came from, and he told me the name of the book. And then that kind of really started me on my path. I got heavy into a lot of Zen and Far Eastern philosophy and meditation and yoga eventually. So, I think I'm a troubleshooter by trade. I can't help myself, and so I'm troubleshooting all the time. And so it was kind of interesting that I was actually having to troubleshoot my own life, because I was really dealing with, this was a life issue, not baseball. So I think through going through some real depths of sorting out what happened to me, and obviously with some help from some people, I started really falling in love with the mental game, and the development, if you will, of the mind and the body. And so early on in my career, it was interesting. I actually my book wasn't quite done yet. I was starting to write it, and I reached out to a few of my ex-teammates who were all in professional baseball, and I said, hey, I want to try this with you guys and see what you think of it, because it really helped me get to a good place from being in a very, very dark place. So the guys were open-minded, which is 1990, 24 years ago. It's funny that the mental game was so new then.
Right.
And people were like, mental game, do you have a problem? And these guys, luckily, because I guess they knew me a little bit, they were excited, and the feedback was just off the charts, and that was all I needed, because I kind of knew I was onto something that really was making a difference. And so, yeah, I actually started in the mental game. I mean, I was a pitching coach in 1990 for 3 years at a junior college through 1992. But really my first, I think, big job was in the Cape Cod League with Chatham, and I was doing mental training for the whole summer with those guys. I interned at Cal Lutheran, where Rich Hill was, who's now the University of San Diego, and spent tons of time with their team. And that was a great experience because we actually made it to the national championship game in Battle Creek. And so I was learning a lot as an ex-player, but I was still feel like I was a coach, and I was integrating this new piece. And I guess like anything in life, and you know this as a coach, when you get really consistent, strong feedback, it's very motivating. And so so that was kind of the genesis. And before I got really heavy into the throwing program and long toss and all the stuff we do there with arm care, I'd say the first 8-10 years of my career, so to speak, were more heavily based into the mental game. And then from about 2000 on, which is when we made our video, I think we really started getting heavy into the bands and long toss. And then in the last few years, I've noticed that I've really started to come back, probably because of my own meditation practice and my own interest in this piece to the game, because as we both know, it's the biggest piece.
Absolutely.
There's not even a close second. So that's kind of where we're at now. So now I'm back to this excitement, and I'm sure we'll get to it, but before I forget, there's a 45, 50-minute talk on YouTube where I think it's 24 years of my experience in teaching. You know, I think it's kind of come to a point where I've gotten really clear about, you know, the key principles. So that video I personally really like a lot. It's only about 1.5 years old, and so on YouTube, if you keyword Jaeger mental talk, you can find a talk on the mental game and also on some breathing exercises.
You and I talked about this before taping this, and you said, which I understand completely, you're talking about practice. Is that this has got to be just as vital as taking your swings or taking your ground balls or whatever it is. You have to practice your mental game. Confidence, whatever, you know, view it as confidence, lack of distracting elements. All these are things that you don't turn off and on. They have to, in reality, they have to become reactive. The guy that catches that ground ball, he catches that ground ball so easily because he's taken 200 of them. And the reason that fastball there is he's be able to react because he's seen it 1,000 times. And if you come in and you practice those, you know, one of my favorite things that I tell kids is your body doesn't know right from wrong. What it knows is repetition. It goes, in fact, in terms of muscle memory, your body, what we find in kinesiology and physical education is your body actually takes the path of least resistance. So what we want to do is we want to create that path of least resistance to the right thing, to confidence and things like that. So let's do this. Let me ask you, before we get into the practice, give us some simple elements of that, of what you talked about breathing. What else would you, to make it very simple, what else?
Simplest thing I could tell someone who's working on their mental game is identify your process. Ultimately, the game is going to come down to, are you great at the 1 or 2 or 3 things you can control in the moment, period. So as a hitter, we know you need to see the ball well as a hitter. That's the first thing. I mean, it sounds funny.
You're right.
But if you don't see the ball well, you're in trouble. So as a hitter, my process would be, you know, I would take a deep breath before I got in the box. Well, that has a lot of value to me because I probably did 15 to 20 minutes of meditation that morning where my breathing was a huge part of it, and it played a huge role in relaxation and clearing my mind and focusing. So it's not just a deep breath, but I would start with a deep breath. When I get in the box, I get my feet, I call on the ground and get in the earth because I don't want to be anxious, so I want to get grounded. And really it comes down to seeing the ball well, and I used to have a mantra, see the ball well and hit it hard somewhere. And the reason I use the word somewhere is because I want my mind to have freedom to know that wherever the ball is pitched, that I have to adapt to it obviously with my swing. so that I can hit the ball hard. And what it did is it simplified the game to this one or two constants. Breathe, see the ball well, hit it hard. All of a sudden, it doesn't matter if I'm 0 for 3 or 3 for 3. It doesn't matter who I'm playing. It doesn't even matter if it's a real game or a practice game. All that matters is can I be great at my process, because I've learned over the years that my process is the key to me having the best at bat possible. Now, Steve Springer would say, well, you could still do everything right and line out. So it's still a moral victory. It's still a plus. Pitching is easier because the ball's in your hand. For me, it would be the same thing with my breathing. Have a focal point, which I call intent. Commit to your focal point, which is the conviction part. So it's the intent and the conviction. So it's the opening, it's the door, and it's the closing of the door. As a pitcher, I know if I do those three things 100 out of 100 pitches in a game, I can't control a ball off the end of the bat. I can't control a swinging butt. But I'm going to pitch as well as I can pitch, period.
One of my favorite stories, and we know how cerebral, I don't know the man, but supposedly how cerebral he was. One of the greatest quotes I've ever heard, and I won't get the numbers correct, but I give it to the kids that I work with, is somebody came up to Greg Maddux after a game, and they said, how'd you do? And he said, 83 for 94. And I say to the kids, what is he talking about?
Yeah.
And they go, I don't know, strikes. And I go, no, he's talking about his own execution.
Yeah.
That 83 times out of 94 pitches, out of a 94 pitch count, he got what he was looking for. It could be that slider away, it could be the changeup in. He executed that pitch. And that's what's in his control.
Yeah.
And what happens after that is out of his control. And he's not responsible for it. You know, he's not responsible for, and what I do, I actually, our friend Steve, our mutual friend Steve, has the inside half of the ball. And see, myself, when I play, that I have three mantras, three commands: be balanced, see the inside, see the ball, attack the inside half of the ball. If I do that, I'm going to square the ball up.
Right.
And I tell the kids, your job is not to get base hits. Your job is to do that. When you do that, then the base, you have to focus on that. You can't focus on the result. And it's so hard because now, and let's talk about this. This is one of the big distractions, especially with kids. There's other distractions, but let's start with the distraction within the game of the results. Especially with kids, it's how'd you do? When I ask any kid that comes into me, I go, how'd you do? The first thing is 0 for this, 0 for that, 1 for 3, 2, whatever. I hit a home run, whatever. And I try to start getting them to be process oriented. So how would you go about that? Trying to get a kid or a player, what do you do to get them away from the distraction of I have to get a result rather than I have to execute properly?
I would pound them over and over. I want to know what your process is. I want you to write it down. And all I'm going to ask you after the game is on a scale of 1 to 100, were you 100 at it the whole game? Or were your thoughts into the consequences, the outcome, the results, who's in the stands? I don't care about any of that anymore. I want to know, and this reminds me of like Michael Jordan, or Tiger Woods.
Or how about, did you ever see it For Love of the Game?
Yeah.
Remember when I would watch that movie for that. When he says clear the mechanism and it's just, he doesn't see anything.
Yeah.
He's the catcher.
Yeah, but we give, as Spring would say, it's like we give kids too much credit for a lot of stuff, and the mental game is the same way. We're giving kids too much credit. We're assuming that if we tell them to stay in the moment or attack the inside part of the ball, that's going to stick. The problem is, as we talked about earlier, is that the human brain, from the time you're 6 weeks old or whatever it is, it starts learning sociological habits. It starts forming, there's programming. And the programming in this society, I call it drama. 0 for 3 or 3 for 3 is drama. Who you're playing is drama. What the weather like is drama. Who's in the stands is drama. What's at stake is drama. So that's why I said to you earlier, the constant is your process. Everything else to me is drama. In fact, one of my favorite commercials was 2 or 3 years ago when Pujols was with the Cardinals on ESPN. And he was the machine, right? I don't know if you saw it, but he comes in to, I think, to a copier. He's making copies in his Cardinals uniform in the ESPN offices, and I think Carl Ravitz looks at him and like, oh man, he's a machine, you know, like, because he is a machine. And then right as they're leaving, like, Pujols, they superimpose like a computer program in his body, and he's like, what do you mean by machine? Like he was mad at them, like for calling him a machine. And to me, that's what this comes back to. When you're in the zone, you're like a machine. There's nothing to think about. It is just happening. And so if you're thinking, you know, that's why I'm trying to keep the mental game simple nowadays. It sounds almost too simple. But if you could master your process, really, right, I mean, truly master it, 100 out of 100 pitches, I know it's not easy, but if you can be great out of 100 out of 100.
Oh, forget it, absolutely.
And if you can, and if 5 out of 5 at bats, well, let's say a total of 20 pitches in a game, you are absolutely committed to seeing the ball well and attacking the inside part. You've got a great chance to be really good. And
absolutely.
And we both know that that's unfortunately not where the average mind is going because of the drama of society and the drama of, I mean, what's a kid doing in his draft year? I mean, that's a whole drama element. What's a kid his senior year in high school trying to get a scholarship? You know, there's drama just with the bases are loaded. I used to joke about this, but if you hooked electrodes up to a baseball player and just sat him right there and just said, you know, take a few deep breaths, okay, now the electrode is showing their wavelengths are nice and mellow, and then you just said, you didn't have to yell it. You just said, bases loaded. I'm assuming that there would be some movement in those waves, right? Because that's just part of what the brain immediately goes to, oh, bases loaded, consequence, pressure, results, drama.
I have a little bit of knowledge of how psychology works, probably enough to, I hope, to successfully help some of the people that I work with. And there's a couple examples that I use when I'm working with my kids, especially some of my older kids that are capable of understanding this. And by the way, a small interruption to myself, when you get into the younger kids, the biggest, I address myself primarily not to the kids, but to the parents and the coaches, is kids don't understand this. They are very malleable. They're very impressionable. Their emotions are running at a high. And just like you said about the drama, take the drama out of this. You know, one of the things that we forget about increasingly in the baseball industry is, hey, this is a game. This is supposed to be fun. Mm-hmm. And I find parents infuse all the drama into this by how'd you do? What are your statistics? So much pressure to succeed. You know, it becomes, to be honest with you, it becomes a parenting contest, not a baseball game. You know, and it's sad. You forget what are the end goals of sports in our society, but. The two things that I would relate, there's one story is about Carlos Beltran. Now, as we know, Beltran is certainly one of the greatest, if not the greatest, postseason player in Major League history. He's phenomenally successful. And one of the things I point out to my college players is he was successful the first time he's in the playoffs. Monstrously successful. You know, he played like... I can't remember. I think he played for the Astros. They kind of rented him for a division series, and he was a god. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And so, what is built up in his psychology, in his mind, is it's called associative psychology. He gets in that playoff situation, and he's not nervous. He's had success. He associates. Just like I say to kids, what do you think of when I say ice cream? They go vanilla, strawberry. When he thinks playoffs, he thinks success. So and there are ways to kind of, to use a phrase, been there, done that. You can practice that process. You can instill that association. Now, one of the things that I did When I was in college, I went through a period where, to be very, very honest with you, I would go to the bathroom, I'd throw up before a game. I was so nervous of your scholarship, you want to play pro, it's nuts. And you're right, the drama is just overwhelming. And what I started to do a practice I started to take myself out of that place and time, and I put myself back. I was 12 years old, and I was going down to the field in the neighborhood and playing with my buddies. And playing pickup games and everything else. And take the consequence out of it, take the drama out of it, and all of a sudden you start being more productive. Now, tell some of the some of the mechanics that you use with your players with this kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, believe it or not, it's going to sound like a broken record. I mean, I'm going to keep coming back to the idea of this process. It's funny how even the mind wants to go in for more detail, or it wants to get into more ways to, and I'm just a broken record. It's like, look, what's your process?
You know what? Sometimes it also comes down to, in baseball, one of the things a lot of players struggle with, it all comes down to, there's so much failure in baseball. A lot of it funnels down to you start thinking about the ways you can fail. How about if I hit it to the shortstop and how about if I get doubled up? What if I strike out? What if I swing and miss? What if and you start projecting failure rather than the process of squaring up the ball.
See how it keeps coming back to the same thing? Right. You could throw any variable you want at me and come back to the same thing. That's what I like about this approach. It's not complicated. It's not easy to pull off, but it's very bottom line. So you can give me any scenario you want. You can talk about bases loaded, you can talk about postseason, you can talk about preseason, 18, 12, 4 years in the big leagues, arbitration year, trying to make a major league team. I'm going to tell you the same exact thing. And you have to master it. And to master it, you have to identify it. Once you identify it, in my opinion, you have to have a practice every day that helps you to be clear about your process, and not to mention help clear your mind and relax your body and focus your mind. So those are going to be my stock answers. People can say, they give me a million scenarios, I'm going to come back to the same thing. And that's what I like about this approach. It's not complicated.
Okay. So
I think it's irrefutable, by the way.
Oh, I agree with you. Now, here's something that you and I talked about previously. So we know what the bottom line is. You have to focus on the process, okay? And
you have to identify the process first. Okay. Really identify, because everybody's different. A hitter may say, for me, it's take a deep breath, see the ball, want to hit it hard. For somebody else, it might be get my feet into the earth and throw my hands at the ball. For a pitcher, it might be get my front side in and explode. So they tend to be similar from my, experience, but it's their terminology. But They better know what it is. And once they know what it is, they better know how to master it, because to me, that's where the rubber hits the road.
Okay. Now then, and I agree with you there. We talked about it. For those of you who haven't seen it, there's a Kevin Costner movie, and it's worth the price of the ticket and the popcorn and the soda. If you just see the thing where he looks into home plate and he says, clear the mechanism, and that's it. It's just everything evaporates, the sound evaporates. All it is the catcher. And Steve Carlton used to talk about this. He said, I didn't even see the hitter. He said, I didn't even see the batter. And he said, I didn't even see the catcher. I see the catcher's mitt. And it is that process that gets you to that point. And then the other thing that we talked about is practice.
Yes.
This is not and when they were setting up the cameras, you were talking about when a player is going through a slump, and he calls you up. Tell me again. What do you say to them? Well,
if they're familiar with our approach, my first line is going to be, how much mental practice or meditation or breathing exercise have you done this week? In the last 7 days. And when they tell me no, none or one, my attitude is like, facetiously, but my attitude is like, you know what? Do it for 7 straight days and call me back and see if you have a problem. Because to me, it's the cart before the horse. If someone's got a problem, but they're not doing the mental practice, which is the foundation of their mental game and their success, why do we want to spin our head around a wheel all day long and start to troubleshoot 50 variables when it's going to come down to one constant: are you on your process or not? And so that's where this word drama comes in. A hitter can tell me about his girlfriend, or this, or that, or the coach isn't playing him, or he's in AAA and somebody else got promoted to the big leagues and he's upset about that, or it's a high school player's draft year. It's endless. And for that reason, I don't want to go there, because we can talk for 4 hours about the drama. I want to talk for 5 minutes about your process. I want to talk about how can you master it. And to me, it's very hard to master your process if you don't have a mental practice every day where you're clearing your mind, relaxing your body, learning how to have some mental discipline, learning how to keep your mind in the present moment, learning how to, maybe as important as anything, when thoughts come in your mind during a meditation, you practice being what's called neutral. So you don't buy into it, you don't engage it, you don't empower it, and you stay present with your breath or whatever you're focusing on. Well, that happens to be one of the most important skills a human being can have. And that's how you start getting better at staying with your process in a game situation when the bases are loaded, or there's a scout in the stands and things are distracting you, and all of a sudden you've been doing this meditation for a month and it's like, man, I see the scout like I heard a distracting thought in my meditation, but it doesn't register anymore because I learned to come back to my breathing. Or in a game situation, I learned to come back to seeing the ball.
It is something that has to be practiced, and it's very difficult. There was a very interesting article that I read recently, which was an interview with a competitor, a woman, who competes in these really incredibly grueling marathon events. And this was kayaking. And just some of the things that they do is just astonishing, with involves largely endurance, but they're really difficult. And she had a great phrase, which I thought was a great starting point for this. And she said, okay, I have this thought, but I can choose to acknowledge it or not.
Meditation.
I can choose to respond to it. I'm tired. Of course you're tired. You've been rowing, or of course, there's somebody in the stands, or your girlfriend split up with you, or there's a runner on second base, or it's whatever. But you can choose to respond to it or not. There are phrases like yellow light, green light, red light. You feel something coming on. Can you breathing? There are breathing techniques and things like that can teach you to respond. One of the things that we saw in baseball a couple of years ago, which just as long as I've been in this industry and in this game, and as knowledgeable as I hope I am, when David Freese got that hit. And I talk to my kids about that. I go, here it is. You've been playing baseball for 8.5, 9 months. And for most of us, the temptation would be, all I got to do is swing and miss. And in an hour and a half, I'm going to be in a restaurant with a cold beer and a steak.
Right.
Seriously. I'm tired. I'm hot. It's late. Just this hour and a half. I can take a good swing at this, and I will be in a restaurant with a cold beer and a steak. But what is he? I mean, that to me, it wasn't the hit. It was what we saw mentally out of that event. I was floored. I thought it was incredible. And that is what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. I'm not a golf fan, but I am fascinated with Tiger Woods. Because what's obvious about Woods, and I wouldn't have a clue how to talk about his swing or anything else, but and I'm sure he's great, and I'm sure there are other people that are as great. What separates Tiger Woods, it's very obvious, he plays the shot at hand. And he's completely focused on the process. He's not thinking about the leaderboard, who's ahead of him, who's behind him, the next shot, the last shot, I'm 5 over par, I'm 10 under par. He's thinking about that shot, and that's why he's great. So it is the process, and it is the practice of that. Can you briefly, let's end on this, what are some of is it breathing techniques? Do you use, let's do some simple stuff. One thing I encourage kids to do is, we're players do is write things down. There's a lot of research about how the act of writing things down is almost a contractual agreement you make with your body. Visualization, verbalization, breathing, calming things down. One of the most interesting things I've ever seen, NASA has a program where they did an experiment, and maybe you've heard about this. They took astronauts and they put goggles on them, which totally inverted their visual world. You heard about this? So that what they saw was upside down. They did it so they could acclimate to weightlessness in space. Here's the interesting thing. So that literally, and they had to wear them when they were in the shower, when they were in the bathroom, when they were walking around, when they were sleeping, they had to wear them 24/7. You know what's amazing? I can't remember the days. I'm going to make this up, that it was 90 days. Let's say, whatever. It's irrelevant. 30 days, you know what happened? Their eyesight turned over. Their body made an acclimation so that they saw things right side up again.
Wow.
And it shows that if you commit to that process, your body develops the neural pathways that it becomes permanent. One of the things you and I talked about is that practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And practice in any shape makes permanent. And your body takes the path of least resistance and the lazy way. So, and our mind is no different than our body. Get 100 swings a day, but also do the repetitive things with your mind, and you develop neural pathways to execute this kind of stuff. So, what are some of the things that you would tell a beginning a college player that came in and said, let me buy into this?
Well, I would teach them a simple meditation that involves some breathing, some presence of mind, and teach them the art of, when stuff comes into their mind, how to stay neutral and not get attached to it. I think that's one of the most important skills you can learn as a human being and as an athlete. So, and it's about the practice. Whatever I teach them to do, they need to work at it. The first few times they do it, it's probably going to be very hard because they're going to have a lot of thoughts come up. It's going to be new, but if they stick with it, they'll probably start to notice a lot of significant changes. And the idea is like anything in life, if you start to feel better, you start to do it more. And so it comes down to whatever the practice is. It could be breathing, it could be imagery, it could be visualization. Mental practice for me, the first month is really a lot about breathing exercises and acclimating to your breathing and getting intimate with your breathing and learning to use your breath to access the present moment, learning how to use your breath to stay clear of your thoughts. And so to me, there's a lot of power and magic behind just getting to know your breath and learning how to breathe properly.
I've done a little bit of that. It's clear. Am I correct? Clear everything out except and just focus on the breathing process, right?
Yeah.
Am I correct?
Well, it's tricky with mental training, but the mind clears as a byproduct of you doing other things. So you're really not actively trying to clear the mind. I think it's a misnomer. It sounds good in theory, but your mind clears as a byproduct of you putting your attention on something that's not a thought. So if I inhale and counted to 1 and exhale counted to 2, and I counted to 1,000, and I never lost track of my numbers, my mind would get very, very clear.
Wow.
If I try to clear my mind by pushing stuff out, my mind is probably going to get very noisy.
I've heard somebody refer to it as the chatter. You have to learn to quiet the chatter, and you're right. It's not easy. It's hard, but like anything else, you get better at it.
Well, that's why we keep coming back to the word practice. Why would I go out to a field today without a consistent mental training practice that's taught me how to clear my mind, relax my body, stay in the present moment, and not attach myself to stressful, anxiety-provoking thoughts if I don't do it every day? Why would I assume I'm going to, just because I take 100 hacks a day, I'm going to be a great hitter? Well, I could be, but I'd sure like to play the odds more of taking 100 hacks a day and doing a practice to really learn how to clear and relax my mind and keep my mind quiet when stuff is coming up that may distract me. I've come back, I've said this a few times. Until human beings realize that there is a practice to train your mind, or really train your attention, how to not get sucked into thoughts and worries and stressors about the future and the past, I think you're kidding yourself to find out how good of an athlete you can be. You still may end up being a good athlete, but maybe you could have been a great athlete.
Right.
Maybe you were a great athlete and you could have been a Hall of Fame athlete. I don't know. But that's why I'm going to keep coming back to this theme, until you have a practice. And it's not very hard to learn it. You can go on the internet and find 1 billion articles and videos on how to do breathing exercises or how to meditate. It comes down to doing the work. And that's it. And until you do the work, I think the average player out there is absolutely kidding themselves on how good they can be.
Absolutely. There's no, and boy, you get into, as I started the whole discussion, you get into upper level baseball, you get into professional players, and this is all of it. This is all these guys. People don't realize how good these guys are at the game. When you go watch a major league game, these guys are rock stars. They're just unbelievable.
But here's what, sorry to interrupt you, but here's what you don't know. You don't know about the 10 or 20,000 guys over the last 5 or 10 years, 5 or 10 years, maybe over the last 5 or 10 months, that were much better than the guys in the big leagues that you've never heard about because they didn't get out of A-ball or double-A, that were way more talented. I mean, you know this. There's a large percentage of guys, I don't say a large percentage of guys, but there's a percentage of guys in the big leagues that are by far not the most talented guys.
Absolutely.
But they're talented enough, and they have an unbelievable mental game.
Absolutely. This is why we're talking about this, because I don't expect everybody to master, but they can't master if they're not aware of it, and they're not aware of what you just said, that the thing that separates is really the mental game.
Yeah, because as you said, these guys it's all relative. These guys, in rookie ball, they're all extremely talented. But when you get to the big leagues, there are some guys that like on a scale of 1 to 10, there's guys that might be a 7 or 8 that is still super talented, but there's a lot of guys that were maybe 8, 9s, and 10s in the minor leagues that will never get out of rookie ball or A-ball or double-A. And it's just because the guys that are, almost as talented as the best guys, they're rock stars in the mental world, and whether they've done the practice of it or they were born that way. But that to me is
there's no question. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It is what separates. All right, we're going to end on that.
Cool.
That's great.
Awesome. Appreciate it, man. Well, I just hope that that someone can take even a few of these different sound bites and at least get curious.
Well, you got. Let's end with that. What which we started with. You've got on YouTube. What is the name?
Yeah. So the key is keyword Jaeger mental talk. And there's a 49-minute video on there.
I actually think it's on our website already. I think it's on my website already.
Even easier.
There you go. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. So to get a hold of us, easiest way is jaegersports.com on our website, and also Twitter. We're at Jaeger Sports, and that's Jaeger and the word sports, and then Facebook we're also Jaeger Sports. So we have tons of free articles and YouTube videos and throwing programs and mental training programs and articles. So you can find all that from jaegersports.com, and again on Twitter at Jaeger Sports.